Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I had kind of a shit weekend, followed by some highlights. But I got T-boned. Somebody ran a red light and T-boned my car on Friday night on my way to dinner with some people, and then the very next morning, my son got in a car accident and totaled his car and some old man's car. Luckily, nobody was really injured in any of them. So a couple people in my car that were in my car are sore, but my son's fine, and the old man that he hit are fine. They're both fine, but just pain in the ass. Lots of it was an expensive weekend. Lots of shitty luck, and now gotta deal with insurance companies, all that bullshit, which is always fun. So that's what my morning has been, dealing with claims adjusters and trying to not get my fucking face suit off because of my son. But other than that, shit's cool. Let's see. That's just a warning about privacy on this live chat thing from YouTube. I don't need that. And we don't have any questions so far. So I'm just going to start fucking with the frame and let's see if you guys have any questions as we go. I'm going to try to get this phone holder thing to articulate a little better for me. There we go. Does this work? There we go. Let's see if I can figure out a better way to point this down here. Hopefully I can see questions as they come up. There we go. Today I'm gonna mess with. I've got this old Spalding Puma. This is one of the first Pumas. That's the actual sand casting. The later ones were a lot thinner. These ones are really fucking cool, and they have the old cotton coils. And started this frame a couple of weeks ago, and that's what happened to my finger. It's healing up now, but let's see. There were 7 stitches in that because this was when this was just a side plate. The belt sander over there grabbed a hold of it, and this piece here dragged through my finger by way of the disc sander, and now there's some sweet nerve damage, and it's quite a bit bigger than my other finger. So this one's all fucked up now. This shader will probably be the cost of my insurance deductible, or maybe it'll be a liner. Maybe it will be. Let's see. What am I building today? I'm not sure. I was gonna mess with. I don't know. I really want to mess with this Puma, but I have to make a. Well, I guess I can modify the space for it, and I want to make this cutback liner. Somebody bought a machine off the website that I need to build, so maybe I'll just do that. Let's see. You always recommend using 22 UF caps on liners, or you change caps if you need a different type of tuning. I use 22 UF most of the time, and I think I probably go over that almost every week, where I say that I change the cap according to the springs, or the springs according to the cap, or the cap according to the coils. Lately, for my custom machines, I've been mostly using 8-wrap coils, not really using 6s anymore. So I'm definitely using 22 UF caps if I'm using 8-wrap coils, or if I'm using anything larger like that. If I'm using a 6-wrap coil, which I seldom do anymore, I'll use a 35 UF cap. But typically 22s. But you can, I mean, it's a matter of personal preference, you know. Like I like the way they run. I like the way a 22 functions, but that's just me. I think I'm gonna just chop the vise off this guy. I think. So let's see. You like your color packers to bog with medium voltage when you putting solid fills. You prefer to run higher voltage and run from the tip of the needle. I like my machine to bog down. I really like that feedback. So let's see. Let's plug in a machine. Find a machine. Hang on. Let's find a machine. Got a shader around here somewhere. Okay, this was made by my friend, Awesome James Hughes, one of my good friends from way back. Okay, so bog. Okay, this is for Guru Marquez. Bog. What he's talking about is when this happens. So when you're working, when you put the needle in the skin, and you're moving it around, you're not hearing it like that. You're hearing it like that. It's giving you that resistance, and your machine is backing off a little bit. When he says bog, it's the machine backing off from the resistance of the skin. So the more resistance you have, the more bog you're gonna have, right? And this thing runs almost exactly how I like my stuff to run. It's a little bit soft. That feels really good, right? Now, the more resistance you have, the more bog you're gonna have. And that resistance can come from your springs, it can come from your coils, or it can come from the surface tension on the tattoo itself, like on the client, right? So if you're using a larger mag, so it's like a 13 mag or 15 mag versus a 7 mag, the 7 mag is going to penetrate a lot easier, and it's not going to bog down as much, right? And the bigger mag, the 15 mag, 19, 21, whatever, the bigger it is, the more it's going to bog down. So the more resistance there's going to be, and the more power you need to have to get that desired result, right? And we're not just trying to see if we can stop that. We're pushing on that, right? We're pushing on the armature bar and feeling where along that stroke it's giving up. Like this has power through the stroke, right? It's not just on the bottom and then stop. It's not just at the top and then stop. It's all the way through. So that way, no matter where you are with your needle depth, no matter how far you're putting that in the skin, you're still getting that power to make a really deliberate, deliberate pass every time. Like every time you hit the skin, you're putting pigment in. Now, if you're doing blending or really light gray shading, and you're building up gray shading, you want that to be a little bit less. I'd say less deliberate, because you want it to be deliberate in that it doesn't really put a whole lot in, right? So you want there to be more resistance, more bog, or I should say, like, well, not more bog. I'd say you want there to be more resistance when you're doing like gray shading, right? So that way, when it hits the skin, you're not really putting a whole lot of pigment in there, right? So the more solid you want it, and the heavier the pigment, and the more saturation you want, the more power you want going in, and the more force you want as you contact the skin. Does that make sense? The only black and gray, I'm going to use a rotary with a big machine. What sort of tuning am I looking for? That for Flex Turbo, I assume that's your real name. Personally, I'll show you what I like for a black and gray shaker. Another machine from Awesome James. This one's a liner. Just by looking at it, I'm assuming how it's going to run. All right, so it's a cutback liner, right? And on low voltage, on about 4.5 volts, it's still running, but it's running nice and fast and nice and soft. So this is kind of where I would be. What up, Adrian? I hope you're well, buddy. I'll call you later, Adrian. Got to catch you up on some stuff. But this guy's running nice and fast and soft, and it's not quitting when I touch it, but it's got soft stroke all the way through. It's got soft power all the way through the stroke, right? So as I'm pushing against that, it's still giving me that feedback that I want in the skin, but it's softer. When you're that's, one thing that, like, it's really difficult to convey online, and that's why, like, an apprenticeship is so important, I think, is understanding the feedback that you're looking for from your machines, like as you're working. It's really, like, you can't really describe that sort of stuff over the internet very well. It's like you have to be there, like, learning from somebody when we talk about, like, what it feels like when it hits the skin. Right? Let's see. Do you want more bog for single to 3 lines for the same reason? Well, I don't know that I would say you want more bog. What you want is, let's see, how do I describe this? You want it to give up a little bit easier, right? So when you're working with, let's see, turn this back up here. So, all right. When you're working with a smaller needle, let me see if I can find a smaller needle. Hang on. No, I'm doing the fucking thing. Yeah, I've been here talking to myself. Hey, Juan. Hey, Juan.
Yeah.
You don't have any singles or 3 needles here, do you?
I can't hear you. What?
You don't have any single needles or 3 needles here, do you?
No, I don't have any needles here.
Okay. You want some?
Sure.
I got some of these 7s. These are like these are straight 7 black hawk straight 7s that they were getting a little bit tighter than we like them, so I got like they're a little bit tighter. They're tighter than supposed to be, but I can use them more. I have a problem with it. Yeah, you got those. Yeah. Well, I was trying to find a 3 or something, but all I could find are these 7s. Let's see. All right, so when you, let me find some paper. All right, so we're gonna go back to, let's see, Lady Hans, right? When you outline with a, let's see, go back down here, right? When we outline with a single or 3, right? You want to be able to move your hand pretty quickly. You want to kind of be able to move your hand about, like, like that sort of speed, right? The slower you are, the slower you're moving, the more of a chance there's going to be for there to be, like, variations in your line, right? It's not going to be quite as straight. You can see that it's kind of like a little bit of a wiggle, and it wasn't intentional, right? So if you're able to just kind of move your hand pretty quickly, you're going to have less variations in your line, right? So, what's that? Oh, shit. Dude, I can have these? What? Juan just fucking laced me the fuck up with some copper lugs. Thanks, dude. All right, so the idea is that lining with something small, you want a fast and soft machine so that way it can keep up with your hand speed, right? But it's not hitting too hard to where you're putting like dots, in the skin, right? So like you, if you oversaturate when you outline or when you run a smaller line, you get these little explosions, right? So the idea is you want like a really smooth, clean line. And when I outline with a single or a 3, I water down my black a little bit by about 20%. The idea is that you really can't tell that it's not quite 100% black. You can't tell that it's 90% black or 80% black when the line's that small, but it waters it down enough to where it flows better, and it's gonna create less clumping with your line. So you have this combination of like a fast and soft machine, watered down black, and a really good stretch and really good hand speed to avoid those explosions that you see. Like it's sort of it's like kind of the reverse technique of outlining with something larger. With something larger, you're trying to get a lot more saturation. So you're slowing it down a little bit, you're hitting harder, and you want your black to be like as black as possible, because that line is big enough to where you can really see any inconsistency in the black. But like if like say you're doing like hair on like a chick's head or on a wizard or some shit, and you're like doing all the noodly little fine line stuff, you can't really tell that it's not 100% black, but it will flow better if you're using like a 90% gray, and that watered down black, that thinner black, is going to be able to keep up with your faster running machine with the smaller needle grouping. I hope that makes sense. I'm kind of like rambling in a circle about it because I'm understanding how it works for me, but I'm having a hard time conveying how it might work for you. Does that make sense? Let's see. Adrian, I had a conversation with Gaston the other day. Like again, I was talking to Gaston. He's such a smart fucking dude. We were just talking about spring breaks, not vacations, but broken springs. And he was saying that he's completely given up on making any machines that have smaller than a 7mm rear spring gap. I'm guessing if you lighten up your armature bar and make your rear spring gap a little bit larger, you're going to break less springs on that machine. I think it's a spring gap thing. I'm not able to check messages while I'm on this thing on my phone because Alex forgot to set it up on a computer and did it from a mobile. I can't answer that text. Let's see. But dude, I would try making a larger spring gap on your machine. It's probably the insurance company calling me about my fucking car accident. Let's see. How different an AC machine is DC machine? Do they run the same with different measurements of parts? Listen close numbers. No, an AC machine, it's the same, pretty much same parts except for the way that it turns on and off. I've had some AC machines. It's kind of wild. The contact point always stays closed on a DC machine. I don't know exactly. I've never set one up. I've had them that I've converted to DC, but I've never gone the other way. I've never gone DC to AC. I've gone AC to DC, and the only ones I've had were from Spalding and Rogers. Wait, I think I might have the parts for one. We might have the stuff. Okay, we do. This is an AC power supply. All right, that's the AC power supply, and this thing puts out fucking hella volts. National Dog Registry. This dude had all the good ideas. And this is the switch for it. And this thing hooks up to the machine. One goes to the front coil, one goes to the rear coil, and then it has this little jack that goes in here. This goes to the power supply, and then it's got a little button in here that turns the thing on. I should try to set one up with this thing. But they would just leave this thing in there, and I don't know why there's colors in this animal marker setup. And there's also, I've got some unused old school Spalding needles. Let's see, look at that. Oh, and here's the front spring, or here's the spring that was on the machine. So this thing was on the frame, and it keeps the contact closed the whole time. I guess I could try to set one up. I've never done that. I could try. Let's see if we have time for it. Got once, brought one in the shop, wondered why it had stopped working. The tube was clogged with pigment. That's why it never changed. Oh my god, gross. It's got a tiny spring gap, almost non-existent like Rollmatic. You made me, but your raw attribute maybe has been solid for years. So yeah, Adrian, I'll call you later, and we can talk about that machine. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think what makes it not work when you have that tiny spring gap is if there's too much of an angle on the rear spring shelf. If the rear spring shelf is flat, I think you can get away with it. But if you have too much of an angle there, you end up breaking springs. I'm curious to see what the angle is on that frame. Is there? Yeah, Chris's frames have a pretty steep angle. I don't know. I don't know how it would cycle because these animal marker power supplies don't have a meter on them, so I have no way of measuring. I mean, I guess I could hook a multimeter up to it and see. That would require effort, and I guess I could do that. I don't know what the upside would be. I don't know why it would be a good idea to do it, other than to be able to have a fingertip switch. And you don't want that anyway, because then they just get gross, right? Let's see. I mean, how the coils turn on and off if the contact is always closed. Well, that's because the current itself is alternating. It's alternating current. DC current is like always on. AC current's not always on. Not necessarily. The rear spring would not be less prone to breakage if it's more flexible. If it's less flexible, it might be less prone to breakage. So if it was a thicker and wider spring, it would probably be less prone to breakage. I'm trying to find a little experiment that I had going. Since we're talking about flexible rear springs. Try to find a little secret project I had going for a while now that I've set aside. So this is something I've been working on for a while now, to eliminate rear spring breaks, and I'm showing you this to sort of illustrate the flexibility of different types of material. Like we were talking about, like if something were more flexible, would it be less prone to breakage? And in this instance, yes. I've been working on a couple of designs like this that utilize a coiled rear spring, and essentially makes it unbreakable. And I had all these different incarnations of these springs made that are really similar to the principle of a clothespin. And you think about it, how long, like some people have clothespins that are, 50, 60 years old. Like you go to vintage shops and they've got clothespins that have been around forever, and they, the springs have never broken. Now, you're not using it, constantly like that, but it got me kind of on that path of studying the way that these springs work, and I started working with a local spring company to develop these things. And if you look close, you can see that some of them have more coils on them than others, right? See, this one's got 4 loops, this one's got 1 loop, 2 loops, 3 loops, right? And what I've learned is that the more loops there are, the softer the spring. So if you were to just use a straight piece of wire, it would be stiffer, right? So this guy with these 4 loops, let me set up a binding post on this and you can see how this thing runs. It's pretty cool. Let me grab a binder, and that way I can make this thing run. Now the only issue with this, and I'm still working on this part of it, it's got some lateral flex here. It's not quite perfect yet, but I'm still fucking with it. And this one's a little bit better because I made this little support. This has been a couple, this is from 2017. I've been working on this for quite a while now, but it sort of got set on the back burner. But let me see if I could find stuff to set this up, and we can look at, this was a back spring experiment that I wanted to look into this to find something that would be unbreakable. And this one, well, the main point is that this thing's got these two little loops on there, and it's quite stiff. And this thing's got 3 loops, and it's a lot softer, and it's the same material. So let's see. Let's set one of these up and see how that works. I'll find some coils here. Got some bits. This is one of Soba's frames that I modified to to use this stupid spring trick that I've been trying to work on for years. It's probably time to get back to it. I'm sad to say that Sean Lanous is no longer in the workshop here with us. It was nice having him here. Come on, really? Okay. Get a little set screw in there. But we're gonna lower the voltage on this quite a bit. That was the main point of this. Actually runs pretty good. And it'll never, ever break. But I'm still working on a way to stabilize that better. And there's really no spring gap. It's like touching essentially. The coils from the bottom broke right at the base. Bottom of the coil to the bottom post. Right base. Yeah, if you're talking about the outside wire, it's an easy fix. If you're, let's see, let me find an old coil. Hang on. Okay, here's a coil that has the wire broken on the bottom, the ones that go to the binding post. So what you need to do is get something sharp and pry that little bit of wire up so you can grab it, keeping some tension on your wire so that way you don't unravel the whole coil. Pull a few inches of it out and then just feed it right back through that hole. And then resolder it and you're good to go. Just make sure you keep tension on that wire so the whole thing doesn't unravel. Like that. And then that's fixed. Just take a little bit off. Now it'll look like that when you're done. So there's like that little gap there. That doesn't matter. It's not going to change how the machine runs, so don't worry about it. It's not going to, it might be a scary thing, but it actually doesn't matter at all. Just take a little bit of that wire off, unwrap it, and then stick it back through the hole. Super easy. And then make sure that when you go to solder it back together, you're stripping that coating off of it. I like to use a razor. like so. And then you're good, to go. Solder it back together. If they're sealed in resin, you're kind of fucked. That's why I don't seal my. Well, I mean, I guess you could try to take it off, but that's why I don't seal my coils in resin, because I want them to be serviceable. Know what I mean? Adrian, I don't know if you remember back on the old Reed Street days, Bart Bingham had set up a machine using a needle bar as the. I think he used it for the front. He like broke a front spring, and then he took a little piece of needle bar where the loop is. Like he. I don't know if you remember that, but he'd taken a piece of a needle bar like this and bent like that, and then used that to make a front spring. Oh, Bart he's fucking insanely smart, like ridiculously smart, and made a front spring out of a little dude like that, and it totally worked. I guess you could flatten it to make it a little softer too, if you wanted to. You could like hammer it out and thin that metal a little bit. I bet if you put a torch to it, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna put a torch to this and flatten it and then make a spring out of it and see how it runs. I'm just kind of curious. I'm gonna do it with a new one though, so it's long enough for me to hold. That smell is just the hair on my hand. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to heat it up red hot and then flatten it with this hammer. Let's see if this works. Proving that it doesn't matter. Let's see, if you we were talking about certificate of running cartridges with a coil machine. Did you ever look into setting up a machine for that? I don't think so, but I have some. I think I have some cartridges here, and I think I have some stuff to do that. So it's good timing. I want to fuck with this needle bar front spring though. Give me a second. Just curious to see how it works. Alright, and I'll try to set up a cartridge machine. Did Bart just run the needle bar around to the contact point? Or he's smashing it flat. He just ran it straight to the needle bar. I think he was like in the tattoo shop and didn't have any springs, so he just grabbed a needle bar and turned it into a spring, which is fucking awesome. That was like literally 20 years ago. Fucking Bart. I definitely fucked up the temper on this steel a little bit. So it's not, I think the right way to do it would have been to dip it in water while it was still hot. And so it holds the temper. So this is going to be a little bit softer than it should be. But like, I really enjoy proving that you can use anything to make tattoos with. That's sort of one of my favorite things about tattooing, is that like the shit, none of it really matters that much, because anything works. Like, there's our front spring made out of a needle bar. Today's trick day. Let's see. It's gonna run like shit because the geometry's all wonky now, but that's all right. It'll still work. You still make tats. And there we go. Pretty sick, right? I should send this back to the guy. This belongs to my friend John. He sent it to me for tuning. I should send it back with a needle bar front spring. He's like, what the fuck is happening? How fucking cool is that? And it worked. All right, So we want to set up a machine for running cartridges. Now, if I remember correctly, we were talking about using heavier springs so that way you could run it on higher volts to compensate for that extra force needed. So let me see what I've got here. Let me find some cartridges. All right, so this thing has, these cartridges have a lot of tension on them, and I've never used cartridges, but I'm very familiar with them. And this is one of those disposable grip things where this thing goes in there, and then he's got this little drive bar deal. And I guess you go ahead and put that on a regular machine and you're good to go. So let me find a, so I'm going to put this on a standard liner and see how much force we sacrifice by setting up a cartridge. Okay, put a thumb screw in this thing. Be right back. I'm looking for something. I found this wing nut over there on the other side of my bench. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just another good trick. This is kind of a large, like it's an older, oversized wing nut. And where you find ones like this is if you go to hardware stores that have been around for a really long time, ask them if they have any screen door hardware. Old school screen doors had these big wing nuts for taking the screen assemblies out of them. And sometimes they're aluminum and they're not the best, but sometimes you can get steel ones and they're nice and big and really comfortable. So try to find hardware stores that have been around, like the ones where there's like the old dude who's been doing the same thing for fucking 60, 80 years, right? Well, this thing runs awesome. So I guess, hang on a second. All right, so I guess, all right, so this was running, I guess to back up a little bit, I guess I should have ran this without a cartridge first. So let me back up a little bit and run it without a cartridge, because I guess that would make sense first. Let's see where we are. Okay, so this is hitting on 6 volts. this is hitting nice and hard, right? Now, if I were to set up a machine in that, it would still run really nicely. Or if I set up a tube and needle in that, it would still run really nicely. So I put in this cartridge here with this disposable situation, and let's see what happens to the voltage. Man, it's a new day here. All right, try that. And we got nothing. We're running the same voltage. We got nothing there, right? Because there's so much resistance from the bar, or from the tension in that cartridge. We got like an incredible amount of resistance, and it's really bogging that machine down. So we can turn that up. We're at 10 volts to make that thing run as hard as it was before. And we're not running nearly as clean as we were. We're not running nearly as smooth. Because those springs are they're really, really stressing out. As you can see, the springs, like, really, really stressed. Right? So what I'm going to do to accommodate all that voltage that we're putting on that thing is I'm going to change the springs so that way it continues to run smooth on that higher voltage, and that's where you get the power for setting up a cartridge. Let's see, back up a little bit. I guess needle bar wouldn't. Here's Black Claw metal tubes and grips. Harrow, that's a question that you would want to address with Black Claw customer service. You would email support@blackclaw.com. Let's see. The machine with that back spring, experiment in that needle bar front spring would look sick. But I guess the needle bar wouldn't break easily. No, it definitely wouldn't break. The needle bar won't. It'll never break. Still messing with this thing for Morgan here. What is the benefit of cartridge versus standard card? Whereas I wonder if some efficiency can get lost when the dry bar connects to the cartridge. I'm not sure I understand your question, Lady Hans. Let's see. Benefit of cartridges versus standard. I guess some efficiency must get lost in the dry bar connects to the cartridge. I don't know. I mean, the benefit, I think, is just to be able to like say, okay, well, this is a 7, and I don't want to use a 7 anymore. I want to use a 3, and I plug in my 3. Right? And now you got a 3 in there, and that's the benefit of a cartridge. You don't have to like break the whole thing down. And I think people just really like the convenience of a cartridge. I've never used them, so I can't say I'm not a fan. I'm just not that familiar with them. So I'm gonna put some different springs on this guy and get it set up more appropriately to run cartridges. If I can find the right tools. Right tool for a job. And you can see, this is kind of wild. I'm going to take the front binding post off and show you the amount of tension that this cartridge puts on this thing. Let's see. So you can see how much how much tension that thing is pushing back on that. It's creating a massive, massive air gap, and the tension to push that down is a lot. That's a great deal of tension. If you take that out of there, the air gap's like half of it, and it's not, and the tension's less than half of it. So I'm thinking that you're going to be probably less prone to spring breakage as well. You know, if you make your springs a bit wider and stiffer for that, because I think this half-inch wide spring is not really set up to handle all that tension and that big of an air gap. It's gonna really take its toll on that thing pretty quickly. All right, so let's see. I guess I should have checked out the rear spring gap too while we were at it. Rear spring gap's pretty tight, so I'm going to. All right, so our rear spring gap is pretty tight on that guy. And that's where our speed was coming from initially. So I'm gonna switch out to a shorter armature bar, so that way I've got a larger spring gap. And that way when I put the wider rear spring on there, we're not losing any speed, because that's important. We don't want to change, so we're not trying to lose speed by making that gap wider, right? So there you go. Oh, man. Here we go. This one's just minimally smaller. Let's see if that works for us. Get some spring. There we go. Alignment tool. All right. There we go. Seriously? I gotta make one. service any questions. All right. I'm going to make this a bit wider than I normally would, just to sort of exaggerate the effect, right? So this is that's the original spring. This is the one I'm making for it. You can see the difference. The gap's going to be wider, but the spring the spring gap's going to be longer, but the spring itself is going to be wider. So that's going to keep our speed up where we want it. We're not going to sacrifice speed, hopefully, by making the setup a bit stiffer. Let's see. And we got about there. I'm just going to eyeball that. Okay, let's see. Boom. Eyeball that shit. All right, let's see what our front spring's looking like now. Front spring's going to be a little bit shorter since we moved everything up front a little bit. All right, this one should work for us. No what? No? Okay, no. No! We might want a stiffer front spring, but I'm going to try this one for now and see how it goes. If it doesn't work, we'll try a stiffer one. It might be too flexible, just given all the voltage that we're putting through there. Okay. Bigger. Little ones? You can't use a little one on there like that. Come on, man. This one's better. Yeah. So let's see. I'm assuming you're talking about like that. That was the first person I ever saw do that was like 25 years ago. Dan Gilsdorf started doing that and showed that trick on the old Reed Street tattoo forum. And it was the alternative to the O-ring. And that shit caught on, huh? All right, so there's our new rear spring. I exaggerated the width of that just to sort of prove a point in terms of what it's going to do. Put some bend on that thing. Now I'm only going to put a little bit of bend on here because the cartridge is going to push back on that a bit more as well, right? So I'm not going to get too crazy with a bend. I'm going to put a little tiny bit of bend on there. And then the cartridge itself should push back on that. Now, keep in mind, I've never done this before, so this is just what I'm hoping is going to happen. I'm hoping we're going to get that speed that we need from doing it this way. I've never set up a machine for cartridges, so this is sort of a learn as we go situation, and I'm excited about that. I'm glad that somebody remembered to ask that question, because we did talk about it the last time, a couple weeks ago, and I haven't really been in here very much since then. All right, so I guess one of the things I want to add about setting up a machine for cartridges is I'm thinking that maybe we don't really need to put much pre-bend on that rear spring at all. I think that we're going to get that tension from the cartridge itself. So our tension right now feels really, really similar to a standard machine, even using that cartridge in there, and that's because I barely put any bend on that. And I don't know how it's gonna run, but we're gonna hope this runs well. So we had this thing cranked up to like 10 volts to push that cartridge before with any sort of force. Whoa! So we can go way down now. All right. Okay, there we go. That's it. That's the trick. We got our speed. We got our speed and we got our power. We got our speed and we got our power to set up for cartridges by losing some of that, making a larger spring gap in the back, compensating for the spring gap by using a wider spring, and by putting barely any bend on this rear spring at all. And then what we're doing is we're relying on the tension from the cartridge itself for that rebound there. So if you're going to set up a machine for cartridges, it's very likely that you're going to only want to use it for cartridges, considering there's no bend on that rear, because it was like just barely enough to create a bit of an air gap there. But now this thing is running on the same 6 volts that we had before. We have the speed we want, we have the power we want, and we have the voltage we want. So we're not going to get hot, even though we're running cartridges. Well, that's pretty exciting. Learn something every day. Get my spring stock in my machine. They only have 1/2 inch wide. Where can I get wider blued steel spring stock? I get mine. I bought this stuff from MSC Direct years ago. And I used so little of it that I've had this roll for, I don't know, probably 10 years. I don't really use very much 3/4 at all. I bought a 100-foot roll of it, and I have 1/2 of it left probably. Sweet. Well, that was fucking exciting. Give you another look at that. Nice wide rear spring, longer spring gap, smaller armature bar, no tension. All right, we're running a bit over. I'm gonna go. I gotta call the insurance company to go deal with this car wreck stuff, and go make sure that I'm not gonna get sued for my son's bullshit. And I will. I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. That was fun. It was fun. It was a good one. I learned something today myself. I'm excited about it. I'm gonna call Workhorse and talk about a cartridge machine, because I think I just figured it out. Take care, y'all.